All right, welcome to the fourth and final game of the evening as we review Wizardry, grounds, proving grounds of the Mad Overlord. Right, so where to begin on this? Um, so Wizardry is one of those storied game franchises that's exerted a lot of influence over the RPG genre and the industry writ large.
Well, specifically the CRPG genre, right?
Um, yes, but also the JRPGs.
Hmm.
Wizardry got really big in Japan, um, mainly because there just wasn't a lot at the time.
Hmm.
Like, and Wizardry. It's kind of important because Wizardry has had a whole bunch of like spin-offs and stuff in that have been Japan exclusive. Like the overall history of Wizardry as a franchise is very fascinating, very complicated, and kind of very outside of the scope of this actual review here.
Hmm.
Um, but it is important to note because of the modern status of wizardry. Um, and that is to say, wizardry was originally created by a company called Seartech. I'm like, and I think at one point there was like two Seartechs or something like that. The rights to wizardry is one of those messes of a minefield of legal complexity that when you know it's mind-bending horror, um, and the basic point is this is why a lot of wizardry titles have gone unavailable for literal decades. In fact, this re-release is the first time the original Wizardry game has barely been available in about 20 years. To put it in perspective, that being said, you know, um, and just the sheer history, scope, influence of this franchise is something that has probably filled many an hour of YouTube video. Um, but once again, is kind of outside our not just the scope of the review, but honestly, my personal scope. You know, like I tend to talk about, you know, childhood experiences when we talk about old games. If there's a connection, Wizardry is one of those games franchise where none exists. Um, you know, my house was Ultima slash the Gold Box series in terms of CRPGs. And technically, Ultima wasn't a CRPG because we had the NES version, which was done by Pony Canyon. Um, so, that was a Japanese conversion of a Western RPG. Yeah, Ultima also got big in Japan. Once again, because there just wasn't a lot in this vein at the time. I mean, though Japan did fill in their own gaps with a CRPG called the Black Onyx. It is worth noting. And so Wizardry, not just the original Wizardry, but the entire Wizardry franchise is just something that has passed me by. Which is also fair enough, because here's the thing. Wizardry would be more popular termed, or specifically termed, as a first-person dungeon crawler. And
which really a lot of traditional RPGs were pretty much dungeon crawlers.
But that has a different connotation these days. Because it's a specific flavor of RPG. Because it's in the two words that typify the genre: dungeon crawler. You know, where some RPGs, are all about characterization. Some RPGs, battles. This RPG is, about going through a dungeon and surviving. Once again, that was the style at the time, because, this is a very old game that was targeting very limited hardware. This game came out on the Apple II in 1981. Even though it was a computer platform, look, there wasn't a whole lot you could do with the Apple II. And this is also a good few years before developers realized you could expand a story via feelies. Supplemental material that was contained within the game box. Once again, that was a favorite of the Gold Box series. No. Wizardry, at least Wizardry 1, is a very simple RPG. Where you are tasked by the king to face the evil archwizard Wendra at the bottom level of a literal dungeon to retrieve a powerful amulet. So, once again, the goal there, the uber goal is about as basic as you can get. Surprisingly, not as cliched as it could have gotten, because, there's no damsel here. I mean, that was just characterization that this game apparently couldn't afford. So, once again, you are tasked with building a party and taking them to the bottom of the dungeon, which consists of 10 levels. And, murdering the fuck out of the wizard. Once again, standard fare. But since this is a RPG from 1981, don't expect a lot of flavor text or, rousing descriptions of adventure. Now, this is pretty straightforward in terms of its design. At least, its overall design. At least on the surface. But then we go deeper. Because one of the facets of a game this age is difficulty. Wizardry 1 is very, very, very hard. It's going to be a shock to a modern gamer just how hard this game is. It's also, it's a bit different than a modern game. So, before I quantify that further, I should mention what's been done to the game because it is relevant. Because this isn't a straight one-to-one conversion, if you will, of the original game to the modern day. No. As you can see from the trailer footage, this game has gotten a full-on 3D makeover, remake, if you will, by the fine folks at Digital Eclipse. And that's not just extended to the graphics. The art's been redone. The monsters seem to be modeled. I think they're full 3D. A bit hard to tell, honestly. But the point is, it's been given a full visual makeover. And also, this game has been given several quality of life upgrades. Like the first of which is it's got a modern day auto mapping system. Sort of. At least what I had turned on or off. And this is important to keep in mind. Because, once again, this is a game from 1981. Auto mapping is literally not a thing. It's like, you want to traverse the dungeon, you have to make your own map. Like, you have to break out the fucking graph paper and keep track if you can. Like, because at least, once again, in this remake, I'm like, a couple of things can happen in a dungeon where it can fuck up your mapping. There's areas of darkness, which really do come across as a modern thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the original. They basically obscure your auto mapping. Like, you won't be able to map something out unless you literally bump up against a wall. I'm like, and much more conniving, let's say, is the random teleportation. Like you can be traversing a level and suddenly you're warped to an entirely different portion of the floor that you haven't been to yet. Now, there is a map spell in the game. Once again, I have to imagine that was in there. But here's the key difference between this game and a modern dungeon crawler like Legend of Grimrock. The Legend of Grimrock series has a full-on auto mapper should you choose to have it on. It's something you can toggle on or off as well. But the shifty thing about Wizardry here is the auto mapping doesn't last. If you quit out of the game, for example, and come back, or if you leave a floor, anything of that nature, the map is reset from where you started. So that can be a problem in its own right. Like, you stop in the literal middle of a floor, go away for a couple of days and come back, you're probably not going to have any idea where you were. And your auto map isn't going to help. I'm like, this is probably something that was implemented to keep the spirits of the old school preserved, bizarrely. I'm like, I'm going to call this a very shitty feature. There's no other way to say it. Like, it's like either have a fucking auto map or don't. This fucking half measure is just fucking obnoxious. And but I don't think I saw a way to turn on a full auto map. Maybe there was, but it's not on by default. Like, no, it's let's call it semi-auto mapping. Like, and like I said, it's constructed in such a way where it kind of defeats the purpose of having it. Once again, I think it was implemented this way to make sure things like the mapping spell were still useful. And that's also tied into, let's say, the overall difficulty, because if you use the mapping spell, you use a spell charge. By the way, since this game was made in 1981, guess what it's a lot like of, in terms of its actual mechanics.
Old D&D?
Yep. I mean...
What? Huh? I can't believe... I'm so surprised. A Wizardry game is mechanically like old school D&D?
It's kind of amazing how attuned it is to old school AD&D. I'm like, and we're talking like first edition shit here. So, you know what that means? You have to put up with the bizarreness that was early D&D. That means things like descending armor class. THAC0. This game has fucking THAC0
Which
in it.
is fine. It's the same thing as base attack bonus, except backwards.
Yeah, once again, it's something that will trip up a lot of modern players. Because THAC0 hasn't been a thing in D&D since second edition, if I'm recalling correctly. You know, so been a while.
Yeah, part of third edition was rearranging things so high number is good, and incidentally, so you don't have to worry about things having negative armor class.
Mm-hmm. Once again, you're going to have to take those things into account. But, you know, it's all here. Alignment, races. I'm not sure how much alignment plays into things, because, once again, this is from 1981. They were limited in what they could do. So, doesn't seem to really be able to have, you know, good cleric or paladin refuses to work with evil fighter or something like that, which is a mainstay of like later D&D games.
Yeah, in early D&D, it was assumed, for whatever reason, you're into this dungeon delving, and that has generally more important than personal moral issues. You all know you're going to have to fight monsters. Some of the later editions had things like where a cleric or a paladin can't work with someone that he, for example, knows is murdering people when he's not around.
Yeah. Another thing to mention is this game does hew towards the original, but when it says the original, it does mean both the Apple II version and the console versions that came a bit later. This is important because apparently the layout, some of the later levels were changed up in the console versions. That's what the note I saw about that said. I mean, once again, here's the here's the thing. You're gonna die a lot in this game. In fact, like one of the on-screen prompts is, don't get too attached to your party or characters. And also mentioning that the important thing is getting the amulet back, not who gets it. Like, you are pretty much expected to maintain like at least 2-3 parties, because once again, this dungeon is out to kill you, not just in terms of enemies. Like, there are traps. Like, I think I was on the second floor when all of a sudden my party just fell into a spike pit trap.
Yep, that's why they added the rogue in like AD&D first edition or something.
Yep. And it is worth noting that the rogue is more useful here than in a lot of old school D&D games.
Oh no, in a dungeon crawler, you absolutely need to have a trap finding person.
Yep. Because you will find chests. They might be trapped. You need a trap finder and a disarmer.
The only other purpose of the thief or the rogue or thief class in the earliest editions was if your stats aren't good enough to qualify for any other class, which could happen if you're rolling fucking 3d6 straight.
True enough. It's also, this game doesn't have modern healing accoutrements. It's like, you might find
you get no channel energy, you will take your turn undead and like it.
I mean, it does have turn undead, but there's a penalty for turning undead. You don't get experience for it, which is something I think differs from old school D&D.
That would have been DM's discretion. Also, if you turn undead and do it really well, they're destroyed instead of turned, and then you should.
Right. Well,
Yes,
once again,
you have
for the
sticks
purpose
to snakes.
But yes, turn undead means they run away from you, literally.
Well, yeah, like, basically you destroy the undead in this game. It's not they don't call it turn undead.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so, you don't get like healing pools. There's not a save point where you can rest free from danger. I mean, that is a much, much later JRPG invention. Like here, in fact, there are points where you don't want the game to save. But here's the thing. This remake has an anti-cheesing situation. It auto-saves. Check this out. Like, so, for example, you don't want your cleric getting poisoned from a battle and just, hit the old reset. No, it will still register that, and your cleric is still poisoned. Hope you've got an antidote.
Although at least this isn't early Dungeons and Dragons where most poisons are just save or die.
Right. In fact, this might have been the game that established that trope. Keep in mind, that's how old Wizardry is. This could have been the game that established, in
Poisonous damage over time.
Yes. Damage over movement in this case. Because time to, or at least in the original, in the remake, the time still passes. And in fact, the remake went ultra modern with menu systems. Annoyingly. It's full on Dark Souls, where if you bring up a menu, it's not paused. Things can still happen. You can, the poison will still drain you. That was kind of annoying.
Can you turn that off, or is it just always going?
I think you might be able to turn it off. Once again, I didn't really fiddle with the quality of life settings. I probably should have a bit more. But there are a lot of quality of life adjustments you can make.
Fair.
And this also, this extends to getting a level. It's not you automatically level up and you get to distribute your points right then and there. No. You got to haul your ass all the way back to town. You got to go to the training hall and you got to train. That's pure.
Put on your copy of Eye of the Tiger and get to work.
I'm being
able to level up and learn new shit in the moment has always been a little bit accepted breaks from reality.
Right.
Having to go back and actually train for your level up, really, if you think about it, makes more sense. Not necessarily even for very long, but...
Once again, this game does it old school. Death. I'm this is, how many ways can I say this is how old school D&D did it, or D&D. Death here, once again, you gotta haul your ass back to the town. You gotta go to the temple, and you have to pay for resurrection. And first of all, the resurrection may not work.
Oh, it's one of those where it's a chance to resurrect.
Yep. The one that works perfectly is beyond your price range, and you may not even have someone in town who can do it.
Yep. And I'm trying to remember if this also has the other D&D penalty. If you raise the dead, they lose a level. Which is something
because temporary negative levels didn't used to be a thing. You just lose a level.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there are things that add or subtract your experience points.
This is one of those things I'm glad modern day D&D, buried into the fucking earth.
Except for a few weird corner cases like the deck of many things. And if you're playing with the deck of many things, you're ready for your game to be fucked with.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't think there's blanche to the DM at that point.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, point is, it's not a sure thing to get a character back. This is why you are encouraged to maintain multiple parties, multiple characters. And you can create your own characters, or you can use presets. For the purposes of review, I went with presets. Mostly. I did create like one character. Didn't use them. And also, like, getting new characters, well, it depends. Some are free, some cost money.
Like real money or in-game money?
In-game.
All right.
You
In
don't
this day and
pay
age, we
real...
have to ask, you know?
Well, this is a remake that's going for faithfulness.
Fair.
There wasn't any way to do microtransactions in 1981.
I mean, technically, but it would not be easy.
There was one microtransaction, and it was here's a free floppy disk with the first bit of a game on it. It also comes with instructions for how to send away a self-addressed stamped envelope for another floppy disk and a little bit of money for a floppy disk with the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. The shareware days.
Thinking about it, even that was well off from what we're talking about here. No, what would have happened in those days is they would have made a game so big that they had to split it off into multiple parts. Like the original East 1 and 2.
And even that probably couldn't have happened till the CD era.
Well, no,
until the CD era, hard drives weren't big enough to hold games.
Right.
Anyway,
well,
that's getting way out of scope, you know?
Yes. What is it? I could go on about various other subsystems and what have you. Like another example that comes to mind is this game is even harsher when it comes to regenerating health than actual D&D. That is to say, there's no camping option, which may have been a space issue.
Camping in a dungeon was always highly unadvisable.
True, but you could do it in D&D.
Yeah.
And like even in like the actual D&D games of the era. Granted, the era is like a good 5-6 years away from Wizardry. But the point is, you can't stop in a place to rest. The only place you can rest is in town. That's another reason why this game is difficult. But once again, this is one of the signature things about a dungeon crawler. Mm-hmm. And not just like a first-person dungeon crawler, any sort of dungeon crawler. You're not really able to refill your resources. So, the long
back in the
game,
old days, the intended play experience or whatever was that you would keep going until you couldn't anymore, and then you would either make your way back, or if you wanted to, you could. There were rules for like, okay, we're just running, and then you lost some of what you'd found.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a quick retreat from the dungeon, you would lose some of what you'd acquired, and then you recover back in town.
Yeah. Once again, there's no quick escape until you learn the teleport spell, which is at least a mid-tier level spell. It's not beginning level, I know that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing: you do have the option of leaving the dungeon at any time, but that puts you the player back in the main city, not your party. They're still stuck wherever they are in the dungeon.
Can you retrieve them, or?
Yeah, or you can move another party into the dungeon.
Because like I remember
Honestly-
Darkest Dungeon where, you know, if you kind of left your dudes, they were just gone.
Yeah,
And I
no,
imagine there'd be
not
some games in this vein where you could go retrieve your party.
Yeah.
You know? Do you have any way to like control the dungeon seed or whatever, or is it just?
I'm honestly not sure if this game is seeded or handmade. Like, it isn't as random as a modern game would be. I can tell you that.
Fair.
You know, like it doesn't reset. Like even if it is random, like it doesn't reset like every time you enter a dungeon, like a roguelike.
Fair.
You know, I mean, do keep in mind this game is like actually contemporaneous with Rogue. You know, if you want to hear more about Rogue, go see our review of Rogue that we did earlier this year. Like, no, like, when it comes to, like, when it comes to party recovery, at the very least, you can recover their stuff. You send another party down, and they're dead. And you do get things like hidden doors and shortcuts via elevators, all that kind of stuff. And other options like multi-class functionality is in the game. So as far as the faithfulness of this remake goes, I can't really speak to that. Because going back to what I said at the beginning, I never played Wizardry. You know, this was like before my time. And honestly, personally, first-person dungeon crawlers is like one of my least favorite role-playing game types. I don't really enjoy playing the genre, and
That's
I've tried.
fair.
I've tried with other dungeon crawlers over the years, like Darkspire, Shining the Holy Ark, the Dungeon Master 2, and I just play for a few hours, and I just find the whole experience to be so very tedious. Like, I'm not sure what it is. It's just a genre that doesn't click with me. But I do know it's a me thing. So with that in mind, there are a few points I need to address in terms of a recommendation, other than like faithfulness. The first part here is Digital Eclipse themselves, because we have become friendly with them. Like, we have had several members of Digital Eclipse staff over the past, let's say, year on the program to talk about their various projects.
They're good people.
In fact, I think when we had Chris Kohler on the program to talk about the making of Karateka, this game was out in early access at that point, but he wasn't involved with this. And I did ask them about an interview, and they declined, citing busyness in their schedule. So we do not have insight into the rationale behind what was done here. Unlike, say, the making of Karateka or Atari 50. I bring this up because Wizardry Proving Grounds of Mad Overlord is a departure from what they've been doing recently. And it's a bit baffling. Because their compilation re-releases and their more recent Gold Master series, they've been taking this Criterion collection, documenting the past, preservation bent, and just stocking their releases with all sorts of historical documents and interviews and all of that in the package. That is not here. Kind of surprising, actually. I'm like, maybe it was an access issue, like they asked, say, Robert Woodhead to get interviewed, and he declined. Some of the other people who made the first Wizardry, they couldn't source documents. Any sort of thing could be behind the explanation to a lack of bonus materials, a lack of putting this game in context. I'm like, and this is where an interview would help. So we would be able to learn why this game, doesn't have like the design doc or business memos or any of the other stuff that we have seen in the Gold Master series or Atari 50 or the Cowabunga collection at all. It doesn't even have like an overview of Wizardry, an explanation of why Wizardry is so important to the video gaming world. I think that was the most shocking thing, because they bucked their own trend negatively, I would say, because once again, even people of our age aren't going to necessarily understand why Wizardry 1 is so important.
Mm-hmm.
This game is like mega old.
Like, the only really thing I know about Wizardry is if it wasn't for Wizardry, Final Fantasy probably wouldn't exist.
Not just Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
Really, the entire JRPG genre would not necessarily not exist, but would look very, very different without Wizardry.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and that's where my knowledge of it ends, because I never really had a PC of the day to play Wizardry.
Like, as I understand it, Wizardry is the game that introduced the conceptualization of slime monsters to Japanese audiences.
Take of that, too well, looks over at so many slime anime in the last, half decade.
Well, that can be explained by Dragon Quest.
Yeah, and Dragon Quest wouldn't exist if not for this.
Yeah. That's kind of my point here. I'm like, there's no framing device here. It's just the game. And, that's perhaps fine and well. It is a bit vexing, given other efforts that Digital Eclipse has done in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't tell you if it was related to them going full-on remake here or what, but it is a factor, a pretty major factor in a choice of recommendation. Because the real sticking point, the biggest sticking point, is the price. Because this game is expensive. There's no other way to get around it. I'm like, it was originally $30 in early access. It's even more now. It's $35, which makes it one on the most expensive scale in terms of remakes, bring back old stuff to new audiences and stuff. And that's where I really run into problems with recommending this to neophytes. And there are other concerns like the aforementioned lack of historical detail and the fact that it is as simple as it is. But we're not a show that doesn't evaluate prices in a vacuum. Now, in order to explain that price, I believe it has to do with the rights situation surrounding especially the early Wizardry titles. As far as I know, they're a bit of a mess, and Digital Eclipse is the first one that's managed to untangle them in quite some time. So that's probably a big reason why this is clocking in at about as much, a bit less than, say, Atari 50, and more, and about $5 more than Dark Forces Remastered, Turok 3 Remastered, and Llamasoft, the Gold Master Series. And also, I want to put this in perspective in terms of Wizardry and dungeon crawlers. For $30, you can get Wizardry 6, 7, and 8 on Steam right now. You can get the later, the last 3 main Wizardry games made by Surtech for $5 less. Now, I will grant you that is on PC only, PC Steam, probably on GOG as well. So when it comes to console, that's not really an option. This game did come out to all the major consoles. But it also puts it in line with the Legend of Grimrock series, which did at the very least come to the Switch. The Legend of Grimrock games 1 and 2, they are modern takes on the dungeon crawler. And, truth be told, not that much removed from Wizardry. Very intentionally so. Right. Like I said, there's just so many things I can mention about the quirks of Wizardry. Another thing to keep in mind is rows matter a lot. And not just in terms of Final Fantasy damage preservation. No. It affects how you can attack, or if you can attack.
Yeah.
Because it's taking a realistic view of rows. Like, if you're in the back row, you can't attack because there are fleshy bodies in front of you. So
unless you can shoot over or around them, how are you gonna take your swing?
Right. And also, this game doesn't or at least the modern version doesn't offer the ability to swing, which is a bit odd because that is a thing that I could have definitely seen old school Wizardry have.
I guess something to note if you really want the Wizardry Proving of the Mad God's original experience, it is available on a lot of abandonware sites.
Yeah, but we can't recommend those.
Fair.
We're talking about an official release that was provided by the publisher. I guess it is one
of those, you can look at it, just go grab it if you're interested. Fair. That is valid.
Jeez. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about in terms of the Legend of the Grimrock series, I did the math on both of them, and they add up to about $40.
For how many games?
2.
There was a third one, or am I thinking of something else?
You're probably thinking of something else. And once again, it's just the original Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord out. It doesn't have Wizardry 2, Wizardry 3, Wizardry 4, or Wizardry 5 in the package.
Or even any of the extra fluff that we get from Digital Eclipse games, like a documentary.
Yeah. So, if you were if you're going into this expecting that the Wizardry collection or something like that, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe Wizardry 2, Wizardry 3, the original 3 Wizardry games are connected in their own trilogy. Wizardry 4, its own thing. We do not have time to talk about Wizardry 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
So how many Wizardry games are we up to now?
Well, 8 official ones, but there's a ton of spin-offs.
Yeah.
The thing about Wizardry 4 is it's almost impossibly hard. Like, it's legendarily hard.
Is it just because the devs made it difficult, or is there like technical issues?
There's
that are
a
making
story
it hard?
behind it. I forget it right now. I've heard it before, but I heard that story so long ago that I don't remember it offhand. I would have to do some research that isn't really pertinent to this review.
Yeah. Maybe someday we can slide Wizardry into a topic of discussion.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of did, but we'd probably have to do the franchise.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of meaning on that, because
yeah,
this is part 0 to the Wizardry topic.
Yeah. Anyway, so you can get 2 comparable dungeon crawlers for $40. Mm-hmm. That's my problem here.
And there is also several others, like Darkest Dungeon is cut from a similar cloth, but has its own flair to it.
Well, yeah, Darkest Dungeon has more social commentary attached to it. Mm-hmm. Like, mechanically, I did note the similarities.
Yeah.
In terms of the treatment
that's kind of what turned me off from Darkest Dungeon, so...
Yeah, but Darkest Dungeon really does frame that as a meat grinder. Mm-hmm. It's in terms of Wizardry, it's just kind of happenstance. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's kind of so the price is kind of connected to the lack of bonus material. I'm not saying that no work was done. Like, this is a full-on 3D remake.
Looking at the model and stuff, that definitely was not there in the original Wizardry. Things were done.
Also, this isn't a low-effort recreation either.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't something that fucking Success slapped for the PlayStation 2. Looking at you, PlayStation 2, Sega Ages titles.
Right.
Just absolute dreadful low-effort stuff. Here, this is, several notches above that, but it's also not, say, Resident Evil 4 remake or Resident Evil 2, something like that.
The whole remake saga at this point.
Yeah. Nothing on that, full-on AAA remake for the modern age either. Mm-hmm. It's somewhere in between. So, if you're an old school fan of Wizardry, you probably already have this. For the neophytes, I'm going to have to say wait for a sale. Wait for this to come down to like $20 or something like that. That, I think, is a more proper price than $35. There's just too little here to recommend it at 35 bones in the year of 2024. Maybe that doesn't please Digital Eclipse, but we do have to be honest with our assessments.
If you like Wizardry or the similar games,
Yeah.
It's probably worth it at that price. We're just not that big of a fan.
It's also, I can't ignore the fact that there isn't the background information that Digital Eclipse has become known for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, almost bafflingly. Like, you know, why isn't there any sort of retrospective at all here? Genuine question. I would like to know.
Yeah.
You know, this is why I wanted to talk to them. But, you know, their schedules would not allow for it.
Right.
Anyway, so I think that's about all I have on Wizardry here. Anything else you two want to ask or add?
Not really that I can think of offhand, mostly because I'm not as well versed with Wizardry to really ask about some of the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. All right. So, yeah, that brings an end to our review session for the evening. So that means coming up on the week ahead for Fragments of Silicon, and indeed passing mention to MSP. We do have a new MSP episode scheduled, and we will have our full team back as well. You know, Kevin was off for MomoCon, but you know we shall welcome him back as well. So, yay that! Like, and coming up on Wednesday, June 5th, we're welcoming Star Hazen of Starlab Games. They're another Game Boy developer.
One more for the pile.
They're currently making a game called Children of Tides with a Y.
And is this for original Game Boy or Game Boy Color or?
Game Boy Color, from what I saw.
Right.
I do admit I haven't done that much research on the game yet. That's usually what the next couple of days are for.
Yeah.
Like, and we do have our first daylight interview of the season happening on Friday, June 7th. We're welcoming Juho Kurokoski of Horsefly Games to the program. And they are developing a game called Hyperdrive In. Your father has triggered a set of cataclysmic events and escaped into the depths of his creation, the infinite hotel of the Hyperdrive Inn. It's up to you to find him and save the world in the process. In this point-and-click adventure, you never know what you will find, who you meet up with, and where you end up at. So, sounds interesting. Looks interesting, too. So, look for that on Friday. And, yeah, until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.